Sega of Europe executive John Clark says that the success of the Yakuza series in the West means that North America is ready for Japanese games.
Something that Nintendo found out back in the 80s.
Take! So Mr. John Clark of Sega of Europe is saying that he wants to bring more games or see more games pushed out into the Western market that have sort of a Japanese mentality to them. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's just the cultural side of things, but it could also mean the way that the games play as well and other factors that are there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, basically, what he's talking about is taking games directly from Japan, translating them, but not really utilizing the localization thing that's very commonplace with video games. Mm-hmm. So what localization is essentially when a game is taken from Japan or anywhere in the world and is brought from one region to another, they basically change the features within the game to be more kind of in common with the local people that are playing it.
Right. So it could be language, for example, but it could also be the way that the games play. For example, when we were younger, Mega Man 2 came out, and in Mega Man 2 we had a different mode. Our mode was a lot easier, like the normal mode was easy, and in Japan their normal mode was our hard mode. So that's one big change. So I really do think that, like, whatever the original creators are working on and their art project is what I want to see.
I agree.
Yeah. I realize that because of localization, you can't always do that 100%. There's a lot of things that just don't come over culturally, whether it is within like maybe the like speech or some of the things that the characters do.
Well, actually, there's a great example in Pokemon, right?
Right.
In the series. So you've seen this a bunch.
Okay, yeah. So I was talking about this earlier. In Pokemon, this is the anime, of course. At one point, Brock in an episode takes out a box and says, "Hey guys, let's eat a bunch of jelly donuts." Except they're not jelly donuts, they're rice balls, Brock.
Yeah.
And they look just like rice balls, and there's no getting around that.
But this is something that does happen in video games a lot.
Yes.
We see something that's in the game that's been translated for audiences, whether it be, I'm going out to eat some like sushi rolls, and they end up just saying, I'm going out to eat hot dogs, or whatever it may be, because they don't believe the North American audience can comprehend or understand or better relate to what's happening in the video games. Now, this is a big deal. It happens not only in gameplay instances where they change the difficulty because they don't believe that a North American audience can play difficult games, which was never true, but there's also that. You can also have issues when it comes to box art. For instance, if you've ever looked at the box art for Final Fantasy games in Japan, it has a very different look to it.
It's
but
so
when they
beautiful.
They're simplistic, they're very clean looking, and they're really nice.
Sketch stuff.
But typically when we get them over here, they've been modified heavily to look very different and just kind of strange looking when you consider the really amazing work they've done in the Japanese releases.
There's a lot of weirdness with the Final Fantasy series with numbering and everything too as well. Yeah.
And basically what John Clark over at Sega of Europe is basically talking about is, look, Yakuza, we tried to do that the first time. Now, with the original PlayStation 2 releases, they did this very North American localization of it with some, I want to say, poor voice acting, but I know there's probably some people out there that liked it. But they really did try to make the game work here the first time around, and it just didn't land.
Yeah.
But with Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami. Yeah, they basically haven't really been doing much other than just directly translating the words from the game and bringing it over. There has been minor localization, but just minor things, just because they need to explain things because a joke wouldn't make sense over here if it would make sense in Japan. It's stuff like that. But what they have changed is very minimal, and the experience feels completely Japanese. They didn't really have to put like Radio Shacks on the streets of the area that you're playing around in the game. They didn't change all the words and all the brands to things you would understand. Like, for one thing, when you go to play that first game, there's Sega cities there, and Sega cities are essentially little locations that have a whole bunch of arcades and stuff like that, and they do exist in Japan, but they don't exist here. So having those changed to just say arcade, right? That would have been bland because you're removing some of the really cool features that existed in the game and exist actually in Japan. And that's basically what he's saying is, we don't have to translate these things anymore. We can just give it to them and they can appreciate it.
Exactly. And I think that's awesome because it creates more of a potpourri of like a gaming like space for people. Like, I don't just want to play games that feel like North American games. I want to play games that feel different. Like, that's what makes things beautiful about gaming, right?
Exactly.
There's so many different things that you can do. So John Clark was talking not only about like changing the names of signs and things, but he was also saying like it's not even just porting over games that are already made. Like going forward, he knows that Sega is gonna like with Yakuza. They're not going to start changing the formula of their games. Like, open world games are huge here in North America, sandbox games, and while Yakuza does have some of that to it, you know better than me, that the game isn't a completely open world game. It's more streamlined. And they're going to continue with that approach because people are open to it.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to go about it. Now, I've never really played the entire Yakuza series, but what I have played is Yakuza 0, and it is an amazing game. It has a lot of really cool features. It's got a really impressive story, amazing cutscenes, a really good and fun gameplay. It's repetitive, it is, but it's that fun kind of repetitive where you want to keep doing it again and again. I love the way that they designed the game, and I truly believe had they tried to localize that experience, it really wouldn't have worked out. So the only thing they really did was just translate the menus and the interface so you can understand stuff, but what they didn't do was go into every single building and change the menus to be in English and stuff like that. When you're walking down a street in Yakuza 0 and you look around, you're in Japan. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that John Clark's talking about, because the belief, once upon a time, was that North American gamers, European gamers, people outside of Japan would not be able to relate or understand what they're looking at.
Which was hilarious at moments in gaming history, because we had games like Yo Noid. Yo Noid is, if you're not familiar with the Noid kids, the Noid was a mascot from the 80s for Domino's.
It was Domino's.
It was Domino's Pizza. He had a video game on the NES, and the original video game was Masked Ninja Hanamaru. and instead of being this cool ninja, a lot of the assets...
We got a pizza guy.
Yeah,
that's so weird.
A lot of the assets were changed to appease the Domino's gods and bring that game over here in that way. I would have preferred a Masked Ninja game as a kid, because it was Capcom, I believe, and they just made great games. It didn't matter if it was a bunny man that steals pizza. Look, the 80s were weird, okay? I would have dug a ninja game.
Yeah, you know, there's plenty of games I've actually played that have been completely translated from one to the other, and they really didn't hold their original idea. And when that happens, sometimes the experience works, like in the instance of Super Mario Brothers 2. Originally, that was another game, and then they didn't bring that game over. Instead, we got this completely translated version that was utilizing a character we were familiar with, right?
Yeah, that's weird, because I still would have wished to have like been in a different dimension where both of those games came out in North America. Like, we got Super Mario Brothers 2, which eventually we got as Lost Levels, which is a harder version of the original Super Mario Brothers with some tweaks and some asset changes, but Japan... Nintendo of Japan thought that was too difficult for us, right?
And you know,
so we got Doki Doki Panic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And let's just make this clear: this isn't just a Nintendo issue or a Sega issue or even a Sony issue. This is a thing that's been going on for generations and years and years and years. In fact, when I was a kid, one of my favorite games to play on the Sega Genesis was a game called Decap Attack.
Now, I love Decap Attack.
Yes, but did you?
I didn't know Shane liked Decap Attack.
Okay, that's really cool.
That's awesome.
But did you know that that version of the game that we got is completely different than the Japanese version?
I did know that. So we got this like ghoulish,
it's like Halloween themed, right?
Yeah.
It was so weird because I didn't know that. A couple of years ago, actually, I got a chance to play the original Japanese version, and when I played it, I was like, wait, what? This is Decap Attack.
I'm not familiar with the Japanese version. What's your character like in that?
Honestly,
probably like a cute little dude.
It looks very different.
I knew it was changed.
Well, you remember at the very beginning, like they show this like this world breaking apart, and they show like this mad scientist. None of that. None of that is in the Japanese version.
It's really weird because in the past with game changes, we've seen so many times that games have been brought over, and some of the more offensive or like gory or like religious things were taken out, and it just seems weird that a game that I remember originally it was not like a monster themed game would become like a quasi-gruesome game here.
And see, I think this is where John Clark is really onto something smart here, because what they've done with Yakuza to bring that over to North America is such a simple idea, and it's a cheaper idea too. right? When you go to localize things, when you go to change whole assets in games by changing the clothing and characters, the dialogue, and all that stuff, it adds a lot more time in production that can actually increase the cost of the production of the game, which I don't think is needed.
Yeah, like Nintendo's going so far now as there's like a team that, I read this, every 2 months or so, there's a team of people that go from North America to Japan to make sure that all the games that are being worked on, like, okay, no, this is fine. It's like neutral for every place, every localized environment.
There's actually a joke in Final Fantasy VII where I believe it's some of the mayor of Midgar and some stuff like that. There's all these like political people that exist in the city, and the people are all named after, I believe, pizza chains to reference that Midgar is just a giant pizza or something like that. It's a joke in Japan, right?
That's right.
But when they translated that over, completely lost. We didn't get that same joke here, and I think Kotaku actually did this great video and article about how localization can drastically alter the way that we kind of see those games.
Yeah, even when you go back to the Mega Man series, we have Mega Man, which Mega just means like, okay, like almost like super, but in the original series, many people know it was Rock Man, and things had more of a rock leaning, you know, like a music leaning within the game itself.
Well, actually, just as it stands, if you've ever looked at the covers to the original Japanese releases of Rockman, they do not look like the original.
What are you talking about? They're exactly the same. Maybe we get, let's find the covers and put them up.
Yeah,
see if you can tell the difference.
You ready? Okay.
Okay.
Here's the North American one.
Okay.
And here's the Japanese one. They look really different, right? And I would argue that one looks a lot better. But I mean, that's just me, and that's the kind of stuff that I really feel that localization can really damage. But folks, what do you think?
Wait. So you're saying that we should live in a world without the localized cover of Mega Man?
Yes.
I don't want to live in that world, Shane.
I do.
I take everything I said back.
I've wanted to live in that world forever. But folks, what do you think? Is this something that you want to see changed? Do you want to see more untranslated, unlocalized versions of games?
Of course.
Yeah.
Keep it real, man.
He says that, but what do you think? Let us know in the comments below.